I'm so excited to be here. This is the happy feel-good talk because this is the moment when you realize just how awesome you are and how fantastic you are in dealing with images because you are here. You're here so you care about images and you care about performance, and this makes me so happy. All right, one of the great things about being the first non-keynote speaker is that I get to find out everything about you so the next speaker and the following speakers actually are like, oh, I don't need to ask that stuff. So help me out here. How many of you self-describe yourselves as developers? All right. How many designers? You can keep your hand up for both. DevOps? Business people? All of them. All of them. Management. All right. We have everyone represented here. All right. How many of you work at small companies? Your definition of small, not mine. Okay, medium companies. Large companies. Oh, this is so fantastic because we have everyone, again, represented here. All right, so imagine I'm a front-end engineer. Okay, you don't have to imagine, I am. I've been tasked with making my company's website more performant. I know performance is everyone's problem, so I'm gonna roll up my sleeves in my sweater, and I get started. Okay, now imagine I'm a back-end engineer. Again, you don't have to imagine because I am. And I am again tasked with making my company's website more performant. Everyone's problem? I'm in. No, wait, I'm in DevOps, I do system administration, I do deployments, I do network systems. You don't have to manage on this one. I do this too. There are people that do individual ones, but people do all of these things. And when you're tasked with making your company's website performant, it's not just the front end, it's not the back end, it's not just the DevOps, it's everyone's problem. None of these roles are independent of each other. And each contribute and can mess up the other person's work. Whew. That was a fast time to drink. Being aware of performance bottlenecks among these roles can help improve a company's or consultant's ability to improve a website. So, this is where I get really excited. How many people here already resize images, deliver different sized images? All right. I am guessing that if you didn't raise your hand just now, you're either asleep, there's coffee outside, or the person next to you is talking to you. So beyond resizing, we have a large number of technologies and techniques that we can use to render images on our devices faster. Knowing where to start is sometimes difficult, as well as knowing, have I done enough? Am I sufficiently done with this task that I can move on? So let's give it a shot. I'm already resizing images. What should I do next? All right, our goals for this are deliver less. We're just gonna not deliver as much as we were. That way we can deliver faster and we can also render faster. At the risk of expressing a controversial opinion, I would also like to say, be like AMP. If you're not familiar with AMP, it stands for Accelerated Mobile Pages. It's an open source project that was is sponsored by Google. It's not really independent of Google. It is supported by other large companies like Twitter and Bing and Baidu, Pinterest, and a few others. Its goal is to produce fast and light images so that they render fast. And the way that this works is that with AMP pages, AMP project-like pages, you end up with a subset of HTML and there's limits to how much you can use in your creation. Excuse me. The project priorities are, you want to build for the end user first. It's all about a user experience. You want to build for what exists today, not, oh, it's okay if it's a little slow right now because next year the processes will be faster. It doesn't work. What exists now? Don't break the web. And I did that again. Don't break the web. Don't make me install a Flash plugin in order to see your site. Don't make me install Silverlight. Just what exists now. These guiding principles, they give me goosebumps because it means that everyone's going to get a faster web. Except it doesn't quite work that way in reality, but these guiding principles are fantastic. So when I say be like AMP, I want to be inspired by the goals of AMP. I want to be deliver fast for the user experience. That's the part where we want to say, be like AMP. So let's do this. But before we can do this, we need to know what less is. We need to know, in delivering less, we need to know what's delivering faster. So we need to know what our current baseline is for our site. so that we know when we make a change, if it's effective, we can keep it. If it's not effective, we can undo it. So another quick check-in. Who uses a web performance tool? Web page test, Lighthouse. All right, I'm excited. I'm going to encourage everyone else to use these too. The simplest one to use is DevTools. Open up the browser, open up the network tab, clear our caches, and reload our page. This is a fantastic first-order approximation of how heavy our web page is, how fast it is. It is fantastically great for finding this information, terribly awful for sharing it, for tracking it over time, and for knowing if your changes are actually effective. Web page test, and it's like Lighthouse and Site Speed and Speed Curve, all of them, like they do all of the tests, they give you a grade, they give you hints on what you want to do in order to, oh my goodness, there is a countdown right there, I did not notice. I love web page test. This is just my favorite. Web performance tools, like web page test, means that you can share your data, you can share it with your coworkers, you can brag about it, look at how great this is, or not great, you can see my site. You can save your data, you can see your trends over time. When you set these up, a few suggestions when you use them. Test all major parts of your site. A lot of times let's just optimize the front page, and oh yeah, it's really, really fast. And it ends up being that that's the fast part, nothing else is fast at all. So different parts of the website, different views, a single article page, the listing page, the account page, the page that you know is the heaviest, the ones you know it's gonna take the longest, the most viewed page, and those are the ones that you wanna track. When you use these tools, use slow, older device, crappy connection settings, because it'll exaggerate all of the bottlenecks. It'll show you, oh, wow, that's really awful. And it means when the CEO of your company heads off to a country where he's only getting Edge or 3G or 2G, does, oh, gosh, this is awful. It won't happen, because you've already fixed the bottlenecks. Had this happen. All right. Run tests multiple times. If you run it once, you might get an outlier, you might get something that works really, really fast, and you're like, yes, I rule, I'm great. And then it turns out that, actually, no, there was a blip on that one. Or you get a really slow one, and you're like, oh, this is so awful, I'm never gonna do this again because it's too hard. So run it multiple times. Ooh, that was exciting. Does that mean something? No. Okay. Automate it. Keep running stats. Don't do it one time. Don't do it, oh, I did it. I got an A and an A and an A and I'm done. No, automate this. Know that it's running all the time. Have it send you a report in the morning. Run it daily. Do it in the deployment process. If you haven't done any of this setup like this and automating, this is like my favorite part of tech. I'm totally willing to help. Contact me. Oh, I'm so excited. All right. Basics, the basics of, that's how we get less and faster. That's how we know that we're doing okay. The basics of image performance. Resize our images. This is the best thing that you can do. Just send smaller things. I know that a lot of you are already doing it. You're already awesome. All right, so make it easy to resize images. Okay, so you have this case where I have an image and I'm going to bring it into Photoshop, and I'm going to resize it and save it, resize it and save it, resize it and save it, resize it and save it. I'm going to do that once. I am never going to do that again, because that is going to be like, this is a waste of my time. It's not really a waste of my time because my website gets faster, but man, that is going to be tedious. So that's not easy. Having a local script where I have an image, I run the script, boom, all my sizes come out. That's even better. What's even better than that is to have a production process that just, copy an image in, and it just gets resized out. That's the way to do it. The next thing we're doing when we're optimizing or when we're making our images faster is to choose the right file format. Depending on the content of your image, you want to choose a different format. Some will be smaller, some will be larger, some will have crappy quality in the particular type of file type that you choose. If you have a completely average site, totally normal, there's nothing special about your site, 60% of your traffic is going to come from Chrome, at which point sending webp images instead of JPEG seems wise. Different formats that are available. If it's a picture, webp and JPEG. If it's a vector format, or can become one, SVG. If you have an animated GIF, and it can become a vector format, SVG. MPEG, MP4, animated WebPs or WebMs if you can't, PNGs for everything else, unless another format's smaller. And this is often the case of people like, oh, it's this way. It's like, whatever one is the smallest is the one that wins. Okay, so we have the smallest image. I've just listed the common ones, the ones that have been around for years and years and years. What about HEIF? I really want to know if this is going to turn into a GIF-GIF kind of sort of argument. Is this HEIF? Is this HEIF? Is this HEIF? The high-efficiency image format from the MPEG working group, made popular most recently by Apple, is really not available for the web. So we can totally skip it. This is a fantastic format for source images. These are the ones that you want to take, and these are the ones that are then resized down into the other ones in the different formats. I mentioned briefly PNG, ping. They are great. They are fantastic, and they are Pandora's box in terms of disasters that can happen with them. You've got PNG 8 and 24 and 32 and lossy and lossless and 48 and alpha, and which are the ones that do. Small size wins, and that often means throwing out color and throwing out stuff that you don't need, because quite honestly, when you're on this tiny phone and you're looking, it's like, you don't need high fidelity. For the most part, no on a GIF. It's worth checking out, though. If you have a black and white image or all grayscale, GIFs might actually be the best. Animated GIF? Nope. Go to MP4. Sprites. Okay, this is the case where, oh, they are so last century, aren't they? They're these, sprites are, you have multiple images all saved into a single image, and you just send the single image, and people are like, you don't need that anymore with HTTP2. You don't need to do that. And it turns out that sprites, they're still relevant. They are still useful. Old school doesn't mean, discard. In some cases, yeah, you can discard things, but this is one that it's okay to do. Anyone here play Pokemon Go? 3 people. Turns out that if you play Pokemon Go and you look at your Pokédex and you're on a slow connection, say in Canada, the images of all the different Pokemon, all 500 of them, load one at a time. So you're sitting there going, 20 minutes later, all of them load. So it's like, that's an unpleasant user experience. I mean, yeah, it's an extreme case, but yeah, if we're following our AMP goals, do things if they can be made fast, sprites are something that can still be quick. We want to optimize our images. And again, make it easy. When you optimize your images, this is where you remove you compress the images down the smallest they can be, and you remove the crap. And the headers, you move the vital information in the headers that are not necessary to the end user. It's unnecessary information to be continuing sending down the line. So we can upload it to a website that'll do this, and then we'll download the no, don't do that. We can use a local program, ImageOptim. We can put it in a local task runner. We can do it in production. Always make it as easy as you possibly can. With respect to optimizing, JPEG encoders, using modern ones, totally the way to go. JPEG's old format, but we have modern encoders that will reduce the file sizes. So MozJPEG, for example, is from Mozilla, and it reduces sizes by 10% or so. And it's available in tools like ImageOptim and task runners like Gulp. And it's easy to integrate in, but oh my God, my favorite. This is my favorite. I'm a fan of guetzli from Google. It says, you'll get a 30% reduction in your image size without any visual difference. And I'm like, 30%? I see 50%. This is fantastic. Except for the fact, it takes forever to run these things. In optimizing with guetzli, my 800K image takes, 3 minutes. My 3K image takes 10 minutes to run through this script, or this command, and it's just, it's so slow, and it looks so great. And I do this once, and it's painful once for me, and everyone else gets my site a lot faster, and it's like, oh gosh, yeah, worth it. Again, not as something that you do one-off. This is something that you throw into an asynchronous process. But it is effective. I have a header image that's originally 65 is a small one. guetzli, it's 33 kilobytes. And you have to check these things. Which is the smallest one? WebP was 41 for me. And so in this particular case, sticking with JPEG's totally the way to go. Progressive JPEGs. We hear about progressive JPEGs, especially if you're doing any kind of web performance tooling. It's like highly recommended. Baseline JPEGs load from the top to the bottom. Progressive JPEGs load from blurry to sharp, which is great because you see something there, and then you realize that that picture of vegetables on your child's plate is actually a picture of gummy bears when it finally comes all the way in. So they're interesting, they're fun to watch, and you're graded on these things, but they don't actually help in some cases. For really old devices, depending, this is how knowing who your audience is very important. For old devices, it takes longer to decode. If you're on a desktop, that's fine. But if you're on an old, and I'm uncertain how much this actually affects with modern devices, but it's still, in the files that I have, it's larger files, and so this one is the perfect opportunity to test things. All right, whew, and that was the deliver less, and that was deliver faster. So the other things, part of the basics that we're doing, we're going to render faster too. Depending on where you are in your improvement process, you might be to the point where I'm going to do the small things, because the small things are going to be totally awesome. For example, including image sizes in the image tag. If the browser doesn't have to go, oh, how wide is this? Oh wait, and like redo layout, this is going to be faster. Go ahead and include them. Sometimes you can't. By the way, inline styles, not always a good thing. Use your HTML5 tags. And source set, picture element. There are so many amazing guides, and I happen to know that there are about half a dozen experts on this one. So I'm going to just skip right over this particular part, but this is what you want to do. You want to source set, deliver resized images. If you are unsure if you are doing source set and responsive images correctly, well, Eric Portas just recently showed me how Martin Oswerger has my back, and he has yours too. He has the responsive image linter. It is a browser bookmarklet that checks images on a web page for common mistakes with responsive images. It's great unless you have properly set up your content security policy, which prevents different scripts from running on different, on your other scripts from running on your site, which I recommend doing. You can run this on localhost. You can run this on a test device with your CSP headers off. With resized image, don't scale them if you can avoid it. Sometimes you can't avoid it. But if you can, don't let the client, if you can prevent it, don't let the client resize on the fly. It makes them look bad too. All right, the smallest delivery is no delivery. So if we can do lazy loading, that's the way to go. Lazy loading is the act of loading images only when the user is actually going to see them. Well, just before they're going to see them. You load a placeholder image, and as the user scrolls down and it comes into sight, the user hits a waypoint. The final image is loaded. Medium is a well-known example of this, and because it is such a fantastic technique and it's well supported, there are libraries just to make it easy for you. Drop in these libraries, and you can use lazy loading. These libraries do all of the heavy lifting. We also have intersection observer. I have been in the web development industry long enough that I remember when I could say, no one resizes their browser. And so, like, I wouldn't need something like intersection observer where it checks for resize, scrolls and resizes. Scrolls, yes, but resizes, no. And now everyone's like, oh, let's go, landscape, portrait. And it's like, oh, it's changing all the time, sort of thing. Intersection observer event gives visibility into the position of the DOM elements relative to the containing element and the top-level viewpoint. Isn't quite supported everywhere, but the lazy loading libraries, the ones that, they feature detect for this, and so you can use, they will use this if it's available. All right. Those are the basics. Those were, I am betting a review for most everyone here, which is great. Yay. All right. Back to our goals. Deliver less, deliver faster, render faster, be like AMP. So, as a front-end engineer, being like AMP is often very difficult. You are at the end of the development process. You aren't at the design, you're not necessarily at the feature gathering, you're at the end, you're just like, you build this sometimes. And oftentimes, it's really hard to affect any kind of change whatsoever. But we can still make things better. We can make things light and fast. We can be like AMP. We can remove unused content. When you see this, it's typically for a front engineer, oh, the JavaScript, remove the object, oh, remove the HTML, oh, minimize the CSS, sort of thing. But this is still true for images. There are images, if you are loading images and having display none on them, you are still loading those images. And it doesn't make sense to load them. Don't load them at all. You have the inline, your critical CSS, you have 14 kilobytes on the first pass from the on the network coming to the client. Put your critical CSS in there. Profile third-party scripts. Time them. See if they're the ones that are causing problems. Remove duplicate functionality. You have 23 trackers on your website. I would wonder what the 23rd one is useful for that the other 22 are not providing. Remove the additional duplication. Optimize web fonts. Subset them. Use WAF2 over WAF. Don't use them at all if you can avoid it, and possibly even use font display optional. All right, fallback, font display fallback gives a small time window for which the client to download the web fonts before it's going to display them. And then when the web fonts are done, it swaps them in. Optional says, if the web font's not there, just display the fallback. We're good. We're good. Do it later. And this is relevant to asynchronously loading things. Maybe you don't need web fonts on the first page. Maybe you don't want them on your home page, and you want them subsequently. So there are things that we do want to exist, and we do want to load, though. And we know that we want to load, and we know that they take a while because the HTML is downloaded and parsed, and then the CSS is downloaded and parsed, and then we happen to know that we need that web font or something. So for the ones where we know what we want to get it faster, that's where service workers and resource hints come in. And these are my favorite parts of recent developments in optimizing. Prefetch, preload, DNS, prefetch, and preconnect are resource hints. Prefetch lets you fetch low priority resources that you don't currently need, but you will when you go to the next page. So if you don't need something here, but you're pretty sure someone's going to go someplace else, and you can preload, or you can prefetch them. This is great for like, you're on the sign-in page, if you have a separate sign-in page and you know, oh, you're going to need these things when they actually log in. Or you're on the home page and this person has never been here before. Well, if they've never been here before and they're going to the pricing pages, load the assets for the pricing page next. If you spend a lot of time on the, you spend a lot of time on the home page. If you spend a lot of time optimizing the home page, it's often really useful to have prefetching of the pages that you're not optimizing as much, because then they still load quickly. DNS prefetch is also really great because instead of loading assets, it will do the DNS lookup for things that you know that you're going to need next. My domain from India, for example, takes between a half a second and a full second to load, which is pretty awful in terms of performance. However, if I can prefetch some of these things, for example, where my images are located, then it makes it a lot faster. For assets on the current page, preload is available for ones that aren't immediately discovered. So the example I give, you download the HTML, which causes a trigger for the download of the CSS, which then, okay, now you have the web fonts. You've got this cascading list before you even get to the web fonts, but you know that you're going to want the web fonts, and you know you want this logos, and you want this fast. Logos might not be such a great one because but preload is a way for the developer to declare the assets that need to be loaded sooner. It gives you a little bit more power, but we'll see that sometimes you might not want that power. Another example. All right. The nice thing about the preload link is that it loads the assets without blocking the page's onload event. So when the page's onload event triggers, the preloaded ones aren't in that block. It doesn't block that. It also has its own onload event, which enables us to react to that also. With the preload link, the media attribute is available and allows us to customize what we load, adjusting for the screen width or for the device type or the CSS. Yoav, who's sitting right there in red, has this wonderful example that I absolutely love about the desktop version of a navigation web app. You want to download this interactive map, and you want to be able to click on all this stuff. And so you're assuming a particular size, you can download that. But if you're on a small mobile device, you just, let's get a static image. You don't really need all of the interaction sort of thing. And so there's this opportunity to use media attributes to download the thing that you want that's the most use for the user. It's fantastic. I love that. Love that example, too. Again, preload means these files are downloaded, and even if they are not used. So you want to make sure you download the right ones. With great power comes great responsibility. So it means you can also mess it up, because there really is only so much bandwidth that's going to be available. So if you say, hey, browser, I know you've been optimized and looked at by thousands and thousands of people, developers who have looked at this and optimized this, but I know better. All right? Sometimes you do, because it's for your site. Sometimes you don't. So this is the case where if you're using preload, you want to do your tests. You want to make sure that the things that you're prioritizing first actually make for a better experience. And the last warning on this is don't use prefetch and preload for the same files. Use different caches. And so you might end up downloading multiple times. All right. Another way to preload known assets is to use service workers. I'm way excited about service workers. Can you tell that I'm excited about workers? All right, service workers. But more for the caching and the offline ability than for performance reasons. When a browser first loads a page, it has a single-threaded JavaScript process that goes through and has to handle all the JavaScript on that page. A service worker is a parallel process that runs that can do a number of other tasks like fetch images, fetch files and assets. It can run long-running tasks. You have a second thread, which is just fantastic. It is nearly universal support, really, really, really close. So there's not really any reason not to use it. And if you're like, but I use AMP and there's no script tag, you can't load JavaScript in my AMP pages, that's okay because there's a service worker tag in AMP pages. So be like AMP here means we can use the service workers to load the assets, but we do need to be aware of the performance hit. It's not a silver bullet, and delaying the registration of a service worker until after the page is loaded means that it'll start after the page is already loaded, which is great. And you get the bonus that a site can work offline. A recipe site from a friend who you're at the store and you've got your recipe and you have no connectivity, that's okay, your recipe's still available. So is that the most efficient use of optimizing time, given how affecting change at the end of a process is much more difficult than the beginning? I and many smarter people than me argue yes. The performance golden rule, 80 to 90% of end user response time is spent on the front end, start there, but it's not the only place that, since we're talking about images, that we can affect these things. That and front end developers often blame with back end developers, and we might not have a separation of the two, so back end developers can still affect performance. First tip, just deliver. Don't do anything in your controllers that are going to cause this images to delay. That seems kind of odd. Don't resize, don't encode, don't decode in real time. And it's like, who would do that? Who would do that? Oh my gosh, who would do that? Well, it turns out that nearly all modern programming languages have the ability to manipulate images. And that's great because the images are fun and interesting, and you produce something at the end. And yes, for a command line process or for a dedicated non-UI application, that's great, but not with the end user. Put placeholders in and then do your processes. If you have limited access and I can see a picture, you're not allowed to see the picture sort of thing, permission-based. Make that really, really fast. Don't make the user wait for any of this. Cache everything. Oh my gosh. cache everything for the longest possible time. Expires headers are your friend. Like, for example, archived content. How often are those images going to change for archived content? They're not going to change. Logos don't change. If they do change, use a new file name, and then you put expires headers on that. Please do not use this naming scheme. Okay, but really, put expires header and use the resource hints. In particular, Pre-connect is another resource hint that suggests to clients that they can set up early connections for HTTP requests that are going to come. So this includes DNS lookups and TCP handshakes and SSL negotiations. And so to the user, these connections, they never see these connections, and the next page happens faster. Why mention it here? Because these resource hints, all of them can be used as headers. They're not, you can send them from the back end. They don't have to come from just the front end. And depending on how your development process works, it might be easier to change the back end than it is to change the front end. All right, that's be like AMP. Solve the problem in the correct layer. All right, eliminate known 404s. You can't eliminate all of them. People type stuff in, people mess around, people cut and paste in the wrong. But when resources are moved, handle them gracefully with a 301 redirect. To which I say, oh, the irony of this next one, minimize redirects. Okay, so how many times have you typed in a domain and it says, oh, and it redirects you to the SSL version, and then it goes, oh, and redirects you to the www, and then it redirects you back to the, I've had this happen. I have this happen more often than just, and it doesn't happen on an example, but it happens a lot. Don't do this. If someone goes to a naked domain, send them to the SSL www. There's no reason to have the 4 redirects. Our goals. All right, back to our goals. Our goals: deliver less, faster, render faster, be like AMP. Best way to do this with images: use a CDN. But CDNs. Oh wait, that's the domain of DevOps. All right, this is where I get really excited about web development, because there are so many server optimizations that can be done in the technology, and usually they're specific to whatever technology that you have, but I could talk about this for days. So I spent a few days actually thinking about this, and it's like, how do I make this, how do I convey this in just the 40 minutes that I have? So here we go. Best way to do it, use a CDN. The problem with using a CDN is that not all projects have finances or the time or the expertise to effectively use one. So if you're in DevOps and system administration and need a few guidelines for server optimization, these are the 5 things that you want to do. HTTP2, which includes SSL because it's required, do compression, clean up after yourself, cache everything, and break it. HTTP2 requires SSL again. I would like to believe that everyone switched over because it's faster, it's better. About a quarter of the net has switched over, so that's not actually everyone. It's a binary protocol, which makes it easier to parse. It makes it easier to compress, which is one of its features. It's multiplexed, which means that it can send multiple things at once instead of sequentially, well, not really sequentially, but you can have request and response times at the same time on the wire. And you can intermingle them. It's great. We no longer need to shard our domains if we're using HTTP2, which is fantastic. And it has the header compression. Headers with cookies and refers, and they're sometimes gigantic, and it takes like 7 or 8 round trips. And if you're on a mobile phone in a not so great reception area, then you end up having to wait forever just for the headers to go. And so HTTP2 makes it a lot faster with the header compression, so that maybe it's only 1 round trip to get some header information. Again, SSL. Let's Encrypt makes it fast, has a script that'll just, if you have your non-SSL configuration, run their script, DevOps, makes it easy to automate, and you can get your SSL configuration. Don't do SSL if you're on a shared host without a dedicated IP address. Don't mix your protocols. Go full on SSL. Turn on compression. I would like to believe that everyone has already done this, but when I mentioned this in a talk about a year ago, I had about half a dozen companies afterwards go, oops, and they turned it on. So compression. It's okay to tune for dynamic versus static hosts. the image asset, or the assets, the static assets can go fast, and the dynamic content can go a little slower. Turn off the unused modules and features. Cache everything. The one that I find most important is break it. So the reality of the web is that everything's going to break. At some point, it's going to break. It's either you choose to deliberately break something and have a backup plan, or someone else is going to deliberately break it, and you're not going to have a backup plan. So turn off the database and see what happens. Kill your caching server and see what happens. Just break your site and see what happens so that you can recover gracefully. All right. You know I was going to say this one too, right? Yeah. All right. CDNs do all of this with grace, style, and speed. If you're able to do a CDN, absolutely do a CDN. There's some fantastic ones out there. All right. Check everything before and after. Not every change is going to be worthwhile. Automate it. You know I was going to say that. And for everyone else that isn't a front-end engineer, back-end engineer, or DevOps, I would like to suggest embrace less. It's okay to put less on a site. It's okay to do less. It's okay to show less. Do we really need 23 trackers? What does that one tracker provide that the other 22 don't provide? There's got to be something, right? Or else why do this? All right, so after that mad dash with different technologies and techniques, which are the ones that work with our goals? Resize images, make them as small as possible, optimize them, use an efficient coder. Use resource hints, prefetch, preload, DNS prefetch, preconnect. Test it to make sure that it's doing what you think it's doing. And use a CDN. In the end, we can be inspired by our competitors, which is what Be Like AMP ultimately means. But the fact is that you're here, which means I'm betting you're already doing really, really well. And if all of this was a review, you're awesome. That's it.
Awesome. I'll get one question for you.
Oh, goodness. I have a question.
Yeah. So before you get off the stage, you mentioned something early on, and I wanted to kind of ask yourself as a person that often makes a lot of mistakes. You mentioned about the linter for responsive images. You've talked to a lot of hackerspaces and a lot of consulting with different companies. What's the number one or number two things that people always break when they're trying to do the right thing with responsive images? What's the common gaffes that you run into?
Not having sizes, the image sizes that match the media queries is the biggest one, because it's like if they don't match, the browser's still resizing. And so having that mismatch is the biggest one, which wouldn't think so, but it happens.
Awesome. Awesome. We've got time for one question. If there's anybody in the audience that has a moment of questions. Awesome. You covered a lot. Thank you very much. Oh. One last, do we have, there's a hand here.
There's not a question. I just wanted to ask, in the presentation, I didn't hear in your presentation, what I did not hear is optimizing for various levels of network access. So when you do things globally, there's a lot of people who have incredible networks and a lot of people who are still on very limited and failing networks. What is your philosophy for delivering for all of those people?
Philosophy is deliver the least amount that you possibly can. And sometimes it means that the slower networks have to wait longer. If I happen to know that they're going to be on a slower network, I'll deliver the lower quality and then give options for higher quality. It depends on the project and the features requested. Best guess is honestly what it is.
Cool. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.